Hi, and welcome to this month's edition of Forbes Let's Talk, the Insurance Edition podcast. And this month, a very special guest, the boss, the head of insurance, Mr. Chris Booth. Welcome, Chris.
Good afternoon.
Hello. It's taken me a few episodes to get you on and wearing you down, chipping away, but here you are. So thank you for coming on.
I ducked it for as long as I could.
And who better to talk about all things insurance than the head of insurance? So thanks very much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Excellent. So you head up our insurance department and all the different sections, which must be a busy job.
It is a busy job. It's a big department. It's a big job. We've worked long and hard to get our structures in place, and we're pleased with the way it's structured. Just for your viewers, effectively we've got 5 sub-teams that are split off into geographical areas and all subspecialities. So we've got the Manchester team, which focuses on the disease team, which of course your good self and your team. We've got the fraud team based in Manchester. We do some housing work there, and there's a section of our public sector client base that's operated out of the Manchester team. Mm-hmm. We've got a team over in Leeds that deal with our environmental claims, headed by Tim Smith, dealing with Japanese knotweed and the tree root claims, as well as a significant amount of housing work that's done out of there and casualty work for the North East and Yorkshire. And then we've got the other 3 teams that are based in our Blackburn office, in the Ribble Valley, and they focus, one of them is a casualty team dealing with local authority work. We've got the complex claims team that deal with all the construction work, sports work and the like, and all the big cases and the policy coverage matters. And then we've got the social services team headed by Keller Bowers, who needs no introduction, and that's all the public sector and the commercial abuse claims and that type of work. So it's a busy role, it's a big role, it's a big department, but it's thoroughly enjoyable, and we've got a great team behind us.
We have, and we're going from strength to strength, and I think partly the reason why we started doing this podcast and introducing people to the different partners, and now sort of more widely the other people that do the work, is that sometimes people don't know how great we are and how big we are and what depth of knowledge we have, and we want to shout about that from the rooftops, because we really do have some really great people doing really great work, and we need to be shouting about it and telling people our worth.
That's absolutely right. I think historically we've probably been our own worst enemy of not being as forthright about our successes as we have been. We've got some great people, we've got some great work, we've got some phenomenal clients, and it's that partnership that really works. Just to give you an example, I've been with Forbes now 22 years, and I'm considered the new kid.
I know. Well, I told this story in other podcasts before. When I came about 6 weeks in, we went for an insurance partners.
We did. I remember it.
And everybody went round the table, because 2 partners had been there for 30 years, 1 for 25 years. Yeah. Went round the table, and I said 3 weeks. Yeah. And then the
almost
next person
of.
was you at sort of 19 years. So it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, we've got a lot of people who've been with us a very long time. We've had a number of people who have left us and rejoined us, which I think says a huge amount, not only about the work we do, the people, but the culture.
Yeah.
I think it's the culture.
Oh, it's the culture.
People want to spread their wings and then suddenly realise the opportunities they had here that actually they didn't realise they had, and they want to come back. Yeah. But it's not only about the longevity of our colleagues and our staff, it's the longevity of the relationship with clients as well. Yeah. I mean, some of our clients that we have acted for 10 years, we think of them as fairly new clients.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the public sector clients that we've acted for 20, 30, 40, and one occasion 50 years continuously. Yeah. Not breaks and come back.
No, continuously.
50 years continuously, and we've got a number of local authorities that we've acted for year in, year out for 30 odd, 40 years. And that doesn't just happen. That doesn't happen overnight. No. It doesn't happen by default. It happens because we put our back into client relationships, and our clients like what we do, and we don't take them for granted. We accept we're only as good as the last job we do for them, but customer care is what we're about. And that is front and centre.
Well, that's what sold it for me, coming from Clyde & Co. Nearly 3 years ago, actually, unbelievably. Yeah, it's gone quick. But nearly 3 years ago in September. But just the way that everybody works together, and it's so collaborative, and I think that's why I joined, Claire Opperchick joined from Clyde & Co. as well, and there's other people that have come recently, just really settled in really quickly and enjoyed it. Yeah, and people come back. It's just a really collaborative atmosphere to work in, both with insurance and with other departments. As well.
Absolutely, it's the culture of the firm, and it's something that is difficult to articulate to someone who hasn't experienced it. We've had people in the past, and that old adage, and it's a tired old saying, but it is so true about the grass being greener. It isn't. No. That's not the experience, because we've had people who have grown with the firm. I mean, take for instance Pauline, managing partner. Started as a trainee solicitor, came through the ranks, through partnership, and is now our managing partner. So, but there are not that many people who start elsewhere and join. I mean, I worked at other firms, some of our national peer firms, so I have seen the way other firms operate, and I instantly saw what was different about Forbes, and that's why I wanted to work here. And it's very difficult to write down on paper what that actually means. You've got to feel it.
Yeah, it is a feeling.
And it's only when you feel it that you get it. And that is something very difficult to put across to someone in a written document. They've got to see the way we operate, they've got to see the interaction between colleagues, between departments, between us and clients, and then when you experience it, you see that it works.
Absolutely. And you're no stranger to showbiz, and
I was wondering how long it would take before that was going to come up.
This podcast must be fairly small fry for you, really, because obviously star of BBC's Claimed and Shamed,
I was
and the
wondering
slow
how long it was
walk
going to
down
be.
the corridor. So and getting our work out there on a national level on a mainstream channel must have been really exciting.
It was exciting, I have to say. It was something that they approached me to do. For your listeners, I was on BBC Claimed and Shamed, which is a programme about targeting insurance fraud. So I was on 6 episodes last year. They've been repeated, and it's extraordinary the number of people, colleagues, clients, family, friends, who've seen me on the programme, who I hadn't actually told I was going to be on. The best story was my niece, who's a physiotherapist. She was at the time living down in Hereford, and she did a home visit, and the patient she was seeing said, "Look, do you mind if I just put the television on while we're doing our exercise?" She said, no, fine. She clicked the television on, and she said, "There was your face." and she said, "That's my uncle." She didn't even know I was on the programme, so there you go. But people have seen it. They approached me probably about 4 or 5 years ago to be on the programme, and we're all very busy, and at the time I said, "Look, I'm just too busy, we've got too much on, I'm just going to have to leave it this time." Anyway, they obviously kept my details, and they approached me again a couple of years ago, and I said, "Look, I will do it." Because I think it's a great message. An awful lot of the frauds that were on that programme were about motor fraud, and that's absolutely laudable. It's an important area, challenging motor fraud, but there were few cases involving casualty fraud, employers and public liability work, and even fewer dealing with the public sector. And that was the big thing for me, because we, as you well know, we feel so very strongly about protecting the public purse, and when it's fraudulent claims attacking the public purse, I personally feel very strongly about that, and that's what they were keen to tap into. So they approached me again and said, "Would you do this?" And yes, I did it, and 2 days of filming later, which wasn't quite as glamorous as...
Yeah, is it a bit more... Well, I was there. I witnessed a lot of it.
Yes,
I mean,
did.
there was the slow-mo walks down the office that we did a few of, which I particularly enjoyed.
Walk in slow-mo. They edited it. I should stress that.
I know, I tease you. But no, it's a lot of going over things.
Yeah, they asked you to do everything 3 times. So every single time we did anything, it was doing it 3 times, which got a little bit tedious, but it was right. And I have to say, they did a sterling job at the editing. It came across very professional. I really did enjoy the finished article. Slightly nerve-wracking, in fact very nerve-wracking, because the first time I saw it was when 10 million people saw it. The first time I saw it was when it was aired on BBC One. So that was quite a nerve-wracking, because I recorded it on Sky, and then I just fast forwarded to me, and then suddenly it's quite a surreal experience on national television, fast forwarding through and seeing your face appear on the screen. But it was very well received. I've had a lot of very, very pleasing comments from clients, from colleagues. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed doing it, and it was great to get the message out.
It is, and the fraud work is so interesting, because listening to you and Chris Velcode, who does the work with you as an associate.
We bore people sensitively about it, don't we?
No, it's quite exciting. So you two think it's quite boring, but we all think it's quite exciting.
Well, without wishing to be too boastful about this, interestingly, I was at a local authority client review meeting just this morning, and there were 3 of my clients in the meeting. 2 of them, we got talking about, they raised this about claimed and shamed, and 2 of them said that they were watching it on catch up, and their other halves, their husband and wife, came down and started watching it, and they said, what you watching this for? And they said, I'm fascinated by it. And they don't even work in the field of insurance or claims, but they were hooked into it, and they really enjoyed it. You know.
Well, it's an interesting area, because we've talked before about how you've worked with the police in some instances as well to look at bigger fraud rings and things like that. That's quite detail intensive, isn't it? But also quite exciting when you see.
It's exciting. It's quite deep. It's quite sinister. A lot of people think that the insurance fraud is just people wanting to just get some ill-gotten funds to go on holiday or go for a night out. It's much more sinister than that. The money that comes from insurance fraud, we know, is often reinvested into other criminal activity. So to buy drugs, to buy guns, to fund trafficking and that like. And we've got numerous experiences of individuals that have been involved in these types of cases that we have linked to serious and sinister criminal activity. Some linked to Al Qaeda, ISIS. With one of my fraud rings, we had the first person ever to be convicted of glorifying terrorism, which was a new offence under the Terrorism Act, and Operation Sanctuary up in the northeast. We've got links to that as well. So yeah, it's fairly sinister work, but it's gratifying when you get involved in these and you manage to interrupt that criminal activity.
Do you think social media has given you another tool to use in terms of investigating and fighting fraud?
It's just one of the tools we use. I wouldn't say we hang our hat on it, far from it. And obviously I wouldn't want to divulge how we find the information out or what tools we use. But yes, social media is part of it. We've got access to a significant amount of data from non-public sources, completely Data Protection Act compliant, but it's information that the general public wouldn't have access to. But because of the work we do and the agencies that we partner with, we've got access to a significant amount of data. The trick, of course, is pulling, because there's so much data, it's pulling that data together to otherwise it's just a receptacle of numbers, and it's when you pull it all together into a meaningful indication of what the evidence is showing you that you can then show that a combination of all these factors leads to the inevitable conclusion that is evidence of fraud. So it's we've got a lot. Social media is certainly
part of it. Just probably making the point that technology is moving on at such a pace, isn't it?
It is.
That 15, 20 years ago, that social media wouldn't have been available, and now it is, and we use it quite a lot in terms of, we use it for our marketing, we use it for our BD, but we also use it in terms of claims across the insurance board to look at different things that are coming up.
There is, but there's as much misinformation out there as there is information.
Of course there is.
And again, that's why we've got a team of dedicated professionals looking at the data and sifting through it is no mean feat, and it is time consuming, it's complicated, but when you get it right, it is so very gratifying. It really is.
Absolutely. And the fraud work just seems to be going from strength to strength.
It does, sadly, I suppose we should say, and it's a combination of things, certainly with austerity, with the cost of living crisis. We're seeing an awful lot of opportunistic fraud, of people seeing an opportunity, and they're not, I suppose you wouldn't say that they're the archetypal fraudster, but they have got no qualms in presenting a fraudulent claim. But what we see an awful lot of is coordinated fraud, proper industrial scale fraud, and that is... There's some big numbers there. You've only got to have a single fraud ring for a single authority with 50, 60 cases linked, and you can be into seven figures in terms of reserves there. And for the local authority market, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for any industry, but the public sector is struggling, and certainly that's a big hit on their resources.
I remember you telling me, and it was quite a sobering thought, and that one local authority, it wasn't a fraud claim, it was a different claim, but they told you that if they ended up paying that claim because they didn't have an insurer for that period, that they would end up having to close a leisure centre or a library because of the amounts of money involved, and that's how tight the public money is on that side of things.
Absolutely, and that's why we put our back into the client relationships we've got, and we've worked very closely with the public sector over the years, and I think that's why we've got the relationships with our clients that we've got, because they know that we don't see these cases as commodities. We put our backs into them. And what I like about working, we don't want to focus just on the public sector because we do a lot of commercial work as well, but what I do like about the public sector client base is that they feel as passionately about it as we do. They think of it as their money, as
absolutely.
do we. And I think when our clients realise that we feel as passionately about it as they do, that's when the relationship works. And it's a true partnership. It's not just about us. The local authority working hard, their insurers are working hard, we're working hard, and that triangular relationship really does work when we all pull together.
Absolutely, and that translates to the commercial work as well, because I represent quite a lot of smaller businesses who either, because I deal with a lot of the historical asbestos exposure cases, either can't trace insurers or there's an exception for asbestos in the insurance policy, something like that, and it's very much the same thing as well. It's developing that relationship, knowing that money could potentially force somebody out of business, if they have to pay the claim, or if we do have to pay the claim, making sure that it's reserved for appropriately throughout, and they know, and everything's a partnership. So it all translates across the business and all of the different clients, doesn't it, as well?
Absolutely, and that's why it's such a... You started talking to me about it's such a big role. It is a big role. It's a big department, but it's very rewarding. Really rewarding as a department head. I love the people that we work with, I love the clients we work with, and I love the passion that our colleagues have got for doing the work we've got. Absolutely,
because we have regular insurance partners meetings, and everybody is really up for it, aren't they? They're really, everybody's, whether it's working with their claims, the BD side of things, everybody's just really, really enthusiastic, aren't they? Exactly. Which is great, which is really good. So your job just doesn't encompass the fraud, does it? You're out there tendering, you're making sure that we're all doing what we should be, keeping us all on track with what we should be doing.
He said with a wry smile.
Herding cats.
No, I mean the fraud work is the background of where I came from. I've done a lot of disease work, the work that you're currently doing, But the management role has grown because the department's grown. There's more regulation. You know, we do need to keep abreast of current regulations, client requirements, SLA compliance. You know, it's a big role. So it's so much more for me than the claims handling, which I've
absolutely.
had to hand over to other people, and they're doing it just as well, if not better than I ever did. So there you go. But no, it's a big role, but it's a very enjoyable role, and I couldn't do it alone, and that's why we've got a fantastic team of the insurance partners, but also the team across all our offices. We've got a great team of people pulling together, and it really does work. But yes, it is. My work goes well beyond the fraud work, as you well know.
Yeah.
But it's an enjoyable role, and feeding that back into my partnership role, my risk management role, the professional indemnity role.
You are very busy.
It's a great. It's great though.
It is.
My wife tells me that I would only be bored if I wasn't so busy. So
exactly, you love it.
Absolutely.
And what I always find really interesting is that you didn't start out thinking about a career in law.
I didn't.
Originally, you were a chemist, weren't you, to start with?
I was, yeah. I mean, believe it or not, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a dentist. But the sciences was always my background, so I was always a scientist at heart. Physics, chemistry and biology through to A-level. I worked in a research lab because I shouldn't really concede it, but I didn't do particularly well in my A-levels as a teenager. And so I worked for 3 years in a research lab, which I have to say I really enjoyed. And I think that's the link in with the fraud work. It's the way my mind works. It's that analytical thing. You're looking for how things are fit together. And that, I think there's the scientist in me, but it's also that fraud work again.
Absolutely, interpreting data as well.
Absolutely.
That's a transferable skill that works there as well.
So I was always a scientist, and I worked in research for 3 years and studied whilst I was working, and I was working through to get a degree in chemistry, which is the field I was in, but then was made redundant when I was 21 when the site shut down. I applied for 4 other jobs, was offered 2 of them on significantly more salary, but decided no, I was going to decline them and go back to university. So got a degree in chemistry, and they offered me a PhD to do my doctorate, which I declined, and cross-qualified into law. And I look back now, some 30 years on, I look back now and do wonder how I had the wherewithal and the guts to make such bold decisions in my mid-20s.
It is a bold decision as well, isn't it? To completely change your course.
First of all, to decline jobs to go to university when I'd been earning for 3 years, and then to turn my back on chemistry, which I, without wishing to sound boastful, was very good at. I got a first-class honours degree in chemistry. They wanted me to do a PhD, which I declined, and then to do law, which I'd never done. And I can remember to this day, my first ever law lecture was constitutional and administrative law, which I hated for the whole of my university life. And I was in that lecture, and I remember thinking, what on earth have I done? 3 months ago I was wearing a lab coat, and I'm now learning about law, and but I got the grip. I got to grips with it.
What made you change? Was there any lightning bolt moment? Or
not really. I think the fact that I had been made redundant from that industry once at the age of 21. I thought getting a degree was going to be the be all and end all, but I actually worked for a guy at the time who had a degree and a PhD, and he was also made redundant, and it got me thinking, is this going to happen to me again and again in this industry? So I was wondering whether I either invest totally into that industry with getting my doctorate, or do I jump ship completely? And in fact, it was my former father-in-law, who was a solicitor, then became a district judge, that got me thinking about a career in law. I spent some time in an office with this firm with someone who's now a coroner, and it got me thinking. Actually, this is an interesting career. I still look back and wonder how on earth I had the guts to make such a bold decision, but I did, and I could not be happier. And if I had my time again, I would do it all again. I really would. And it was a hard decision to make, and it was a bold decision, and it was a hard transition. But it's a whole different way of thinking. You know, when you're looking at science, it's black or white, and the law is rarely black or white. You know, it's rarely cut and dried. And that's something that took me a while to get my head round. But I did, and here I am.
Here you are.
Yes.
Here you are, and absolutely, you know, loving life, and we just keep growing and growing, which is testament to yourself heading up the whole department that everybody's really enjoying working for. And thank you so much for coming on as well. I really appreciate it, and I got there in the end, so I'm very chuffed.
My absolute pleasure.
But thanks very much, Chris. You've been a brilliant guest, so thank you.
Pleasure.